Hi, my name is Dante King, and I'm the author of The 400-Year Holocaust, White America's Legal, Psychopathic, and Sociopathic Black Genocide and the Revolt Against Critical Race Theory. I am here today sharing a few pieces of the premise of my book. I want to offer some highlights, some perspectives that I actually highlight in the book. And one of the main purposes for my book was to amplify some of the perspectives of Black academics who have investigated both whiteness and anti-Blackness and or anti-Black racism as mental illnesses, as very severe conditions that are dire to our culture. And so one of the things that I do in my book, in addition to amplifying these perspectives, is I lay out a framework both through the colonial period into the formation of the United States in terms of how whiteness prevailed, in terms of the creation of it, as well as anti-Blackness. And it can be very easily seen when investigating it or viewing it through a legal lens. And so I'll share a few of the perspectives of scholars that I quote and reference in my book, as well as some of the examples that I share. And so the first is Cheryl Harrison, a paper that she wrote in 1993, which is titled Whiteness as Property. One of the things that she notes in her paper is that whiteness emerged not just for the purpose of exclusivity and superiority, but for the purpose of subjugation, the need, the necessity to subjugate others, which we know. And as Black people, we live that every day. Particularly though, when we go to Dr. Alvin Toussaint, who was the Dean of Psychiatry at Harvard, one of the things that he says in the late 60s, early 70s is that I think we have to establish that white racism is a mental illness. And this really stuck with me as I was doing the research for my book. And then Dr. Bobby Wright and his work around the psychopathic racial personality, he says, and he says it very plainly, in their relationship with the Black race, whites are psychopaths, and their behavior represents an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity with roots deep in their evolutionary history. The psychopath is an individual who is constantly in conflict with other persons or groups. He is unable to experience guilt, is completely selfish and callous, and has a total disregard for the rights of others. One of the best methods that can be used to measure the psychopathic traits of the white race is observing and analyzing their universal overt behaviors and attitudes towards Blacks. And so again, I'm going to the framework that I lay out in my book, and I'll share a few examples. When we look at legality, white legality, and or European, English, British legality through the 17th century and beyond, which is what my work does. I look at it when in terms of the courses that I teach, where I teach at a few universities. I lay out the framework that really demonstrates the perspectives that were just shared. And so I shared this example, which is the Negro Act of preventing insurrections, preventing Negro insurrections, an act in 1680 that really stifled and prohibited Blacks beginning to commune and or Africans who were communing with each other and or organizing. Because they were fighting back for their lives. They were resisting rape, torture, brutality. And so this act says, whereas the frequent meeting of considerable numbers of Negro slaves under pretense of feasts and burials is judged a dangerous consequence, for prevention whereof for the future, be it enacted by the King's most excellent majesty, by and with the consent of the General Assembly, and it is hereby enacted by the authority aforesaid, that from and after the publication of this law, it shall not be lawful for any Negro or other slave to carry or arm himself with any club, staff, gun, sword, or any other weapon of defense or offense, nor to go or depart from his master's ground without a certificate from his master, mistress, or overseer, and such permission not to be granted but upon particular and necessary occasions, and every Negro or slave so offending not having a certificate as aforesaid shall be sent to the next constable who is hereby enjoined and required to give the said Negro 20 lashes on his bare back, well laid on, and so sent home to his said master, mistress, or overseer. And it is further enacted by the authority aforesaid that if any Negro or other slave shall presume or lift up his hand in opposition against any Christian, shall for every such offense, upon due proof made thereof by the oath of the party before a magistrate, having received 30 lashes on his bare back, well laid on. And so I'll just stop and share here before I continue that this law is influencing, it is enabling, it is encouraging white people to exercise a degree of power and control over Africans, over Black people during this period that really gives them sovereignty. That if they assert that a Black person did something to threaten their lives potentially, or to invoke any type of potential threat, that they could then, just by the oath of their word, claim that they felt some type of fear or scared, and the Black person would be subject to substantial brutality. The last part of this act says, and it is hereby further enacted by the authority aforesaid, that if any Negro or other slave shall absent himself from his master's service and lie hid and lurking in obscure places, committing injuries to the inhabitants, and shall resist any person or persons that shall by any lawful authority be employed to apprehend and take the said Negro, that then in case of such resistance, it shall be lawful for such person or persons to kill the said Negro or slave so lying out and resisting, and that this law be once every 6 months published at the respective county courts and parish churches within this colony. And so you've got Christianity as it is implemented or developed and functioning begins to function as an organization, an American organization in the 17th century, as well as people who become members of the white organization who are not only exposed to, but are the organizations of Christianity, the organizations of whiteness, or the organization of whiteness is founded upon principles of terrorism. And so when does that subside? When does that go away in terms of the its viability, or in terms of its significance in American culture, in terms of how white people show up in America in 2022, as well as how Black people experience America in 2022. Another example of this, and I really emphasize the substantial piece here in the last portion of this, and this is an amended act in 1705, and it really references an earlier act of 1669, which is called the Casual Killing Act. But I want to emphasize a core piece. This is when you see the transition from Christianity to whiteness begin to occur. And this law says, and if any slave resist his master or owner or other person by his or her order correcting such slave, and shall happen to be killed in such correction, it shall not be accounted felony, but the master, owner, and every such other person so giving correction shall be free and acquit of all punishment and accusation for the same, as if such accident never happened. And also if any Negro, mulatto, or Indian, bond or free, so whether a free person, a free Negro, or an enslaved person, shall at any time lift his or her hand in opposition against any Christian not being Negro, mulatto, or Indian, he or she still offending, shall for every such offense proved by the oath of the party receive on his or her bare back 30 lashes well laid on, cognizable by a justice of the peace for that county, wherein such offense shall be committed. And so you got the transition from, again, Christian to white. And in my book, but more so in the courses that I teach, I talk about how that transition occurred and why. And it was mostly due to the ways in which Black people and Indians were being inducted, if you will, into Christianity. They were being baptized. And so as they begin to be identified legally as Christians and as Christianity, that identifier provided freedom for Blacks and Indians. They begin to enact laws that says, hey, if an Indian or a Black person becomes Christian, it does not afford them freedom. And so you see really within a 30 to 40, I would say maybe 30, 40, 50-year period, this transition from Christianity. So they're using a lot of different language during this period, freeborn, Christian, and then it becomes white. And so you see it here in this one last example. It says, and for a further Christian care and usage of all Christian servants, be it also enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted that no Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, although Christians or Jews, Moors, Mohammedans, or other infidels, shall at any time purchase any Christian servant, nor any other except of their own complexion, or such as are declared slaves by this act. And if any Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Jew, Moor, Mohammedan, or other infidel, or such as are declared slaves by this act, shall notwithstanding purchase any Christian white servant, the said servant shall ipso facto become free and acquit from any service then due. And so this law is basically saying that no Black person or non-white person can hire a white person as a servant, a laborer, in any way. And if they do that, if they spend their money, they spend their resources pursuing the employment or hiring of a white indentured servant, that servant is going to become free. They can't work for a Black person. They can't work for anyone who is darker than they are, because it highlights the complexion piece. And so this is shaping the cultural aesthetic of America that remains with us to this day. And so I define anti-Blackness in my book as a white American legal, social, cultural, economic, institutional value and belief system that involves the deprioritization of Black people or humans labeled as Black people, as well as the criminalization, hyper-negativity, hyper-scrutiny, and negative positioning of Black people and or Blackness throughout all aspects of American life. And so anti-Blackness, just as much as we discussed white supremacy and its influence and significance in American culture, anti-Blackness has just as much, if not more, influence in the American cultural identity in terms of its embeddedness. And so there is an unwritten licensure in American culture that gives not only white people, but groups that white people prioritize above Black people and above specifically African Americans to commit harm against and to mistreat and denigrate Black people in any way. There's an unwritten licensure that provides for that. And it also provides that Black people can mistreat Black people in any way. And so the last piece that I'll leave you with is a quote by Dr. Randy Borum, because he talks about the gradual and slow transition into terrorism. And so you've got the white organization being founded upon principles of terrorism by, year after year, decade after decade, being given the legal rights in every way, whether it be through brutality and violence, or whether it be through developing housing policies and laws and or other discriminatory acts that were taken against African Americans throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th, 21st centuries that's still going on, or whether it be white academics proving through the most notable white academic institutions that Blacks are inferior in every way. You've got a nature that exists within American culture that is sociopathic, in Dr. Bobby Wright's words, psychopathic towards Black people. And so Dr. Randy Borum says the transition into becoming a terrorist is rarely sudden and abrupt. What we know of actual terrorists suggests that there is rarely a conscious decision made to become a terrorist. Most involvement in terrorism results from gradual exposure and socialization towards extreme behavior. And so this is what we see in terms of the violence that is geared and targeted towards African Americans in American culture. So please go to my website at danteking.com, subscribe to my page, also purchase a copy of the book. I will be featured at a host of different conferences throughout the end of this year and next year. And if you're interested in courses that I teach, there's also information on my website about those courses. So I look forward to seeing you and communing with you and having more in-depth discussion about my work. Thank you.